Question that used to come up often for me when I was younger and in my anxious attachment phase was, is this intuition or is this anxiety? Is this my gut or is this anxiety? Because once you've been through enough confusing relationships, everything starts to feel like a clue. Is he texting differently? There's something off. Your chest feels tight. I have butterflies in my stomach. What does this all mean? You know, he's taking longer to reply now. You can feel the energy change. Am I picking up on something or am I overthinking it? First of all, I want you to take the pressure off of you because you don't have to know this question immediately. And I think that's the part that we forget, that you can have a feeling without immediately turning it into a conclusion. Sometimes you are anxious and sometimes you are picking up on something real. Sometimes you might not know yet. It took a long time for me to build that discernment of when I was just being anxious and once when something actually was happening, right? Like being able to trust my gut. I think one of the biggest differences is when you know it's anxiety is that anxiety is urgent. It usually wants to know right now. It doesn't offer patience. It wants certainty, it wants reassurance. It wants to solve the entire relationship in that moment. It's like, okay, something feels off. We need the screenshot. We need to find the receipts. We need to ask our group chat, what do you think about this situation? We need three different opinions. We need to know what this means right now. You might not even be able to sleep until you get those answers. I remember being that way. It was like I would feel something, in my stomach or whatever. I feel something was off, and often it was right. But my anxiety went wild. Like I would just need to figure it out right now. I couldn't function. I couldn't go to work. I remember being in acting classes back then. Oh God, big failure. But I remember being in acting classes back then and not even being able to focus in acting class. And now being so far removed from those years. I mean, it's been like 13 years since then. I think I was 25. I look back and sometimes I'm like, damn, I don't even think I gave myself a good shot at being an actress, despite all the money I spent in acting classes when I lived in LA, because I was so damn anxious with relationships all the time. And I think that's the thing too. Intuition is still going to feel uncomfortable as well, but a lot of the times it will feel quieter than anxiety. Intuition in your gut might be more like, I don't like that. I don't love this. But you're able to wait and it'll watch and it'll observe and it'll witness and it'll pay attention. And I want to be careful here because I don't want to make it sound like anxiety is always a loud voice and intuition is always calm, because it's not. Humans are way more complicated than that. But it's the urgency, that's something I want you to notice. If your brain is going, I need to know this now and I need to have the answer, I'm not going to be okay. How I explained to you earlier of how I couldn't function at work. I could hardly sleep at night because I would have this feeling and I would be so urgent. And if you feel urgency, that might be your anxiety talking. Building self-trust and starting to trust your intuition is knowing that not every weird or off feeling needs a same day verdict. Sometimes you are going to need more information, right? Even in Now I'm married, and in the beginning of the relationship when I first started dating my husband, there was still things that came up that like would hit me in the gut, and instead of immediately reacting, I would sit back and I would observe and I would say, okay, let me see that my intuition's going off a little bit. Let me ask him about this, or let me gather more information, you know? So hopefully that explains the difference. But this is always why I'm telling women, stop trying to solve people immediately. Let them reveal themselves to you, because over time, that's what my husband did. That's how we built trust. And that's how I started to learn the discernment between what was my actual anxious attachment and my anxiety versus what was my intuition, you know? Um, because when you're anxious, tiny things can start feeling massive. He, this is some of the examples that I can remember. So, right, a guy texting me and he used a period instead of an exclamation mark, or this is another big one. He would watch my story, but then he didn't text me. I would start making up stories in my head. My anxiety like would start thinking, "Oh my God, does he like me or not?" Like going into this whole thing. He said goodnight with a period instead of using a heart. in those circumstances, you need more data because it could mean something and it could not. I don't think that you should prosecute just on that. And I say that with love because I know how real that feels as a formerly anxious, attached girly. Man, I look back and I spent over a decade, definitely over a decade, being just very anxious all the time in relationships and being confused and questioning and trying to figure things out. I felt like a detective all the time. And it was a lot, it was a lot. So if you've been hurt before in a relationship, your brain and your nervous system is going to always be watching. It's a protective mechanism, right? If someone in your past suddenly pulled away, and this could even be in your childhood, you know, it could be in your childhood, maybe your parents weren't consistent, or maybe it could be in your teen years or even your 20s where someone cheated or they became inconsistent. Now your body and your brain has learned, uh-oh, this change means danger. Change is not safe. So now you're noticing everything. And that doesn't mean that you're crazy. It's your brain trying to protect you. But it's your brain trying to protect you, but that protection is not always prediction, right? that and that's an important distinction that you have to make to heal. This is why there's some therapies that I think are great uh, for this type of work of building self trust in yourself. I do a lot of somatic work and internal family systems, CBT, strength based, compassion focused therapy, um, attachment based is great. So if you're looking for therapy on this, these are some of the therapies that can help with that. But, you know, I think that it's important that we teach our nervous system and our brains that not every alarm means that there's a fire going on. I also don't want you to do the opposite thing either, where every uncomfortable feeling gets dismissed as, oh, that's just my anxiety. We can't do that either, because sometimes women are getting scared to be too much or too anxious that then they don't trust themselves and they stop listening to themselves completely. And you need to be able to pay attention if something genuinely feels off. You know, a lot of times I'll see women be like, nope, it's probably just me. I'm just overreacting. But you matter too in this equation, and your feelings do matter, and we can't gaslight ourselves either. So I think it's important that instead of immediately asking, is this anxiety or intuition, asking ourselves, what is this feeling asking me to pay attention to? That question is going to give you a lot more room for exploration. And maybe the answer is, I do need more reassurance from him or within myself. You know, Usually when I feel anxiety now with my partner, I feel anything is off. It's very rare because he's done a great job of creating a safe space for me. But if I ever do feel like something's off or I need something from him, like reassurance, I will ask for it. I will come to him and I will say, this is how I'm feeling. I don't know if this feeling is right or not, but this is how I'm feeling. And he'll reassure me and it'll go away. Now, of course, this is a person that's reassuring me that I feel safe with. Had my ex reassured me, I was like, okay, yeah, he's lying again, because he usually was. This is why it's important to be with somebody who has created consistent, safe space for you. But, like I'm saying, like with my exes, right? Like, it is important to look at patterns as well. Like, if this person has been inconsistent for 3 months, okay, well, that's some good data right there, right? Now we have information. And this is where I want you to start to separate the feelings from the facts, right? Because feelings and facts can be two different things. Those are not the same thing. Feelings and facts are not the same thing. You can feel rejected without actually being rejected. This is also why, um, if you have childhood stuff, childhood wounds where you felt abandoned, rejected, not good enough, your parent was criticized you, they had too high of expectations, and now you're a perfectionist. They, you felt neglected emotionally. Maybe they were there financially and physically, but emotionally, like me, that was my case. I felt very emotionally neglected by one of my parents specifically, or that caused a lot of trauma for me. Um, and I had to work with that. You know, You can feel suspicious without somebody actually lying. Maybe somebody's not lying, but you have learned to now be suspicious because people have lied to you in the past. You can feel unsafe because something reminds you of the past. An example of this for me is whenever a man would be raising his voice, I immediately went into panic mode because it would remind me when I was a child, you know, when I would get yelled at by my dad. And so now as an adult, that can be a big trigger for me and it can make me feel like I'm in danger just like when I was a kid. So, you know, it's important to heal that stuff too as you go forward because this is going to help your discernment and knowing what is anxiety and what is intuition. Now, it's different if you feel suspicious and they've lied multiple times. Okay, that's data, that's information. Or if you feel confused and you've been confused for 6 months. If I've been in a relationship and I've been confused for 6 months, I'm probably it's probably because he's causing confusion, right? Now, all of that matters. All of that information matters. One weird text that might be off to you, I don't know. I think it needs to be more of a pattern of inconsistency. You know, that's going to give you more data. One awkward conversation. Oh, they must not like me. No, maybe it's just awkward, you know, and that needs to be a conversation. I always say, whenever you feel anxiety, you have to have a conversation. It doesn't matter if it's with a friend or a romantic partner. If you feel anxious about anything, you need to have a conversation with your partner. And if you consistently feel anxious or confused, then that's something that I recommend therapy for because it can help you work through that. But constant confusion, that's information. And I think that this is where self trust starts to become important, right? Self trust, by the way, does not mean I'm always right because you're not. You're not. You're not always going to be right. I think I'm a pretty good read on people as a therapist now, but I'm not always right, right? That's why I'll say if this relates to you, but I'm not always right. Um, my intuition can miss, but self-trust is more I can notice how I feel without immediately panicking and going overboard, I can give myself time to sit with this uncomfortable feeling so that I can gather information. I can ask more questions. I can set a boundary. And if a pattern keeps showing me the same thing, I trust myself to pay attention and not abandon myself, choose myself. And then I can also leave a situation. I am not powerless. I do not have to stay if I see enough negative information, right? That feels very different than hypervigilance because I don't want you walking around too. Like some of my clients, sometimes I'm like, girl, you trying to detect danger everywhere. Like you're looking for danger at this point, and danger is not even here. Is the danger in the room with us? You know, that gets exhausting and it's not fun. It's not fun. And you're not going to be able to have healthy relationships if you're hypervigilant. The goal is never not to trust anybody. The goal is that I trust myself to watch for what happens. And you don't have to figure out someone immediately, you know? Just date them, get to know them. One of my famous lines that my clients and my friends will hear me say is, "You don't know that man." I'll say, "That man is a stranger. That man is a damn stranger. You don't know that man. I don't think you even know a man for a while. Like, I think that in the beginning phases when you're dating, you should just be getting to know him. You should just be witnessing, observing, setting boundaries, see what it's like, observe. Let let time pass by so that let the time do the work for you. Stop trying to solve the man and figure him out so quickly. Like, give him time to reveal himself. I'm begging women, let men reveal themselves. And the only way that you can do that is if you give it time and you move slow. Because I'm going to tell you what, within a few months of knowing him, you don't know that man. I don't care how much you love him, how much you think you do. You don't know that man. That man is a stranger, hon. He's a stranger. I got to drink a lot of water because I have about 6 sessions a day, so my voice be giving out. But you don't have to decide immediately, if a person is terrible or not. You might on the first week, they might do something really terrible, but you can just notice things that might give you a little bit of anxiety and say, huh, I noticed that, and then watch. Does it happen again? What happens when you bring something up? Do they listen? Do they clarify? Do they make you feel ridiculous for having a feeling or make you feel like, well, I'm trying to think of what somebody says, like just saying like, like making you feel bad about bringing something up. Like you're too dramatic. You're always worried about something. Well, that's information too. I love it. Your first few months, especially, should be collecting information. And one more thing that I really want you to hear is that keeps, sometimes anxiety keeps moving the goalpost. You're going to get reassurance, and then you might need more reassurance. He says that he likes you, but does he like you enough? He might make a plan, but why Friday instead of Saturday? He texts back, but why did it take him 40 minutes to text back? These are things that your anxious mind might tell you. You know, sometimes there is no answer that might feel like it's enough. And that is a sign that the real issue isn't necessarily what's happening in the relationship. Sometimes the issue is that uncertainty might just feel unbearable to you. And that's something else that I work through a lot in therapy is with my clients is learning how to tolerate uncertainty because relationships come with uncertainty. There is no way that you can get around that because you can never guarantee that someone's not going to hurt you. You can never guarantee that something's going to work out long term. You can't read somebody's mind. I know that a lot of people after they've been hurt, they're like, I don't think I'm never going to trust men again, or you know, and I understand that because I went through that. My last two relationships, I was cheated on, and I was manipulated, and I was not treated how I should have been treated. My heart was very used and abused. But when I went to go search for my husband, I'll talk about this later about my dating journey in 2022. One thing I really had to do some inner work first before I went out on that journey. My intentional dating journey is what I call it. Um, because I had a great fear of that happening again. I was like, two men who I loved and trusted used and abused my heart, gaslighted me, manipulated me, had narcissistic qualities. How did I attract two men like this? It took a long time for me to trust myself that not only was I gonna pick better and be able to identify the red flags better, but also that, you know, I could get hurt in this process again. There's no guarantees of being cheated on. And I had to do some real work on my nervous system and on my thinking patterns because I knew that there is no guarantee. Even now I'm married, happily married, and there is no guarantee that this man can't cheat on me someday. He can't leave me someday. So it wasn't about like, how do I make sure that nothing ever bad happens? I had to shift my mind to if something bad does happen, do I trust myself to handle it? Will I leave? Will I talk to him about it? Will I set a boundary? And this is the part that I really want for you because I don't want you to miss out on love. Love is the greatest thing in the world. I'm an independent girly through and through, but like I love being married. I love being in a relationship. Being with this man has elevated my life to new heights that I didn't even know existed. But I had to be open to it truly, and I had to become vulnerable enough to let it in, you know, not becoming better at predicting what he was going to do or what any guy was going to do. I needed to become better at staying on my own side, not abandoning myself, and staying on my own side, no matter what. If someone had shown me something I didn't like, I was going to trust myself to notice it, not make excuses for it. If something became a pattern, I was going to respond to it, not just be okay with it. I was going to bring it up. If I need to ask a question, I'm going to ask you. I don't give a shit if I'm a burden or I've asked you 10 times. If I need more time, I'm going to take it. And if I don't know yet, I'm not going to force myself to find an answer. It's okay to not know. So next time you get that weird feeling, I want you to try to ask yourself what actually happened, not the feelings, but the facts. And then I want you to ask yourself, does this remind me of something? I like to talk about this as like, is this my trauma ears or is this my healed ears? If I'm hearing this through trauma, you know, not good. Need some healing. Or is this actually fact? And is this becoming a pattern with them? We got to pay attention to the patterns. You don't need to hold a full trial ahead. You know, you don't need to have 12 opinions on if it's right or wrong. You don't need to even know today. You don't need to solve it today. You're allowed to stay curious about it. You're allowed to take your time. You're allowed to trust yourself without believing every single anxious thought. You need to catch those thoughts and challenge them. And you're allowed to feel anxious without immediately deciding, you know, if your intuition is having you, is warning you of a disaster. And maybe that's the goal for us today, is to not perfectly know the difference between anxiety and intuition every time. But the goal is knowing whatever this feeling turns out to be, I'm going to be able to handle it. I'm going to be able to set a boundary, listen to myself. I can wait for more information, and I'm not going to abandon myself trying to figure out somebody else, because I know me and I know what I'm going to do. My name is Stephanie. If you made it to the end of this video, I'm a licensed mental health counselor. I'm pretty new to YouTube. I love making content. I'm on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. You can follow me on any of these platforms. I love making content for women who are starting to choose themselves, learning not to abandon themselves. Um, Maybe you've had childhood trauma that you need to work through. Maybe you're learning how to be in healthy relationships and navigate that. Maybe you're learning how to intentionally date. I have worked through all of that not too long ago. I've been a therapist for about 5 years, but I started my healing journey. I want to say 2021 when I left my last toxic relationship, codependency, left it all behind, went on a deep dive through my own childhood trauma and finding myself and did a lot of inner work. And then a year later, I did an intentional dating journey. I ended up dating, oh my gosh, so many men, about 50 men probably. I ended up meeting my now husband, who I also had to leave for a period of time. I'll talk about that in another video. But, um, you know, there were so many times that I wish I would have found this content that I make to have a better understanding of myself and relationships, and could have spent so much less time being abused and used, although it wasn't in vain, right? I learned things, but it is, I try to make content and be the therapist that I wish I would have had. So if you're interested in therapy, I do take, I do one-on-one sessions um, for clients in the state of Florida. And if not, just follow along and subscribe. And I'm happy you're here.